Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Anthony Chang, our Heat beat writer at the Herald. Anthony, it's just about time for training camp. Are you excited?
It's crazy, right? Like, it feels like the season just ended a little bit. But here we are a few days away from media day, training camp. The NBA season is like, start of the season is less than a month away. So yeah, things are happening.
Yeah, by the time people listen to this, Panthers will have kicked off training camp. So
Yep.
we're like fully in that winter sports swing. Obviously, like college basketball is just around the corner. So it's kind of funny. The NFL and college football start, and like then all of a sudden, just everything starts all at once. Are you excited to go to the Bahamas?
Yeah, tough assignment. Somebody has to
Yeah.
do it. I'll tough it out and I'll have my reviews of the experience next week on the podcast. I'll be actually live from the Bahamas
Yeah, when we record
next
next
time we
week,
record
you'll
the episode.
be.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get like a sponsorship from the resort that you're gonna stay at, and no free ads right now, but like poke around about it and see if
I
we
can
can.
wear a Bahamar shirt. I have no
Yeah.
problem with that. Like, give me a couple free drinks. I'll do that. No problem.
All right, so we just got checking in one more time before training camp starts. Starting next week will probably be, well, I guess starting this week will probably be pretty much every week from now until
Yeah.
the end of the season, barring I don't know, maybe a week in the preseason if just the
Next
time.
the next 8 months
Um,
you're stuck with this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to run through kind of those last minute questions, basically heading into camp. I don't think they're obviously this Heat team is very similar to last year's team, so
Yeah.
um, I think there's not, some NBA podcasts are probably coming on and doing big old camp previews. What's it going to look like? Obviously the Heat are going to look, very similar, aside from maybe a couple. They always find a guy on the edge, Haywood Highsmith or whoever the next one is. Max Strus kind of put himself on the map in the preseason. What was it, like 3 years ago now? 2 years ago? 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but the big one, I guess, to start with is we talked about this last time we recorded after the Donovan Mitchell trade is that Tyler Herro extension still has not happened. Deadline to sign him to that is the start of the regular season. Do you think it gets done at this point?
My gut says, and I've kind of held firm on this the entire summer. My gut says that they will sign him to an extension eventually. I think we're getting to the point. I would have been surprised if they would have done it during the early portion of the offseason because it makes this has been we've talked about this now for months, but it makes him untradeable once they sign him to an extension basically for a year. And Tyler Hero's one of your top trade chips. So that's kind of the reason why this has been delayed so much. But I think we're getting to the point now where media day is less than a week away. Camp is less than a week away at this point as we record this. I would not be
Mm-hmm.
surprised if it happens at any point now. We're getting to that point, like, yeah, that you can make an argument that he should wait to the last possible minute, which is the day before the regular season starts, so they have like a little bit less than a month away to do it. But you can also make the argument if you know it's probably going to get done at this point. It's hard to see a blockbuster trade getting done the next 3 weeks before the season. That's not how that's usually done. Um, Maybe you get this done so it's not hanging over Tyler's head at media day where he'll be asked about it uh, the entire day or at training camp when that's the only question he's probably going to be asked for most of that week. Maybe you try to get that resolved now, so that's not an issue he has to talk about in a week. So we'll see. I still think it'll happen. Will it happen this week? You know, maybe, but he'd have 3 weeks to do it. So um, as long as they do it before October, I think it's 18th or 19th, they're fine.
Mm-hmm. And then once they sign him to that, because obviously,
Yeah.
we talked about this when the first time we talked about um, the extension possibilities is yes, it gets this like constant trade rumors away from him for a little bit, but inevitably, if a Bradley Beal or Damian Lillard or someone Shea Gilgeous-Alexander suddenly becomes available, um, he's still going to be the number one guy in those trade talks or in those trade rumors.
Right.
So when how much does this stave off? Realistically, how much do you think this staves off those constant trade rumors for him?
I think pretty much completely, at least for this season. I mean,
Yeah,
at the end, once the extension kicks in July 1st, then all that goes out the window, and he's
right.
again, fairly tradable. He'll have a higher salary, obviously, but he'll be tradable at that point. Right now, it will make it so difficult because just to kind of without going too much into it because it's very convoluted. Salary matching purposes for one team, he'd be whatever, I think it's 5.4, whatever his salary is this season. And then for the other team, it would be whatever his um, extension salary is. So we're expecting that to be around like say an average of 25, 26 million a year. That's a big difference. It doesn't mean a trade is impossible, but to bridge that gap, you're going to have to bring in multiple teams. You're going to, there's going to have to be other salary absorbed in the deal to make it work
Mm-hmm.
cap wise. So when it's, for if it was the extension was a little less and the difference between his salary right now and the salary of the extension wasn't that big, it would make it a little easier. But since it's going to be so wide, it's essentially impossible for him to
Right.
be traded this season if he signs that extension.
Do you think the Heat, they have not, they typically give these extensions out.
Yeah, that's why I think it gets done.
They,
That's why I
they
think it
did it
gets
with
done.
Bam,
Yeah.
obviously, was the
Justice,
most
Jay
recent.
Rich. Yeah.
Yeah, Bam was the most, I'd say still the most notable because there was that Giannis possibility still floating out there at the
Right.
time. Um, do you do you think there's any hesitancy on the Heat's part to do this because of, I mean, obviously a lot of Heat fans are frustrated they didn't really upgrade the roster, and I think would still like another star to come in some capacity. I don't know how the Heat feels, but do you think there's any hesitancy to give this extension out because of the way the NBA works, where I named three guys, and it wouldn't be shocking if two of
Yeah.
them are on different teams by the end of the season.
I think you have to say yes. There should be some hesitancy because if not, it
Yeah,
would have been done by now, right? There's a
like
reason
right,
why it's not done. And that reason is because it basically takes him off the table to be traded. And doesn't mean they don't like Tyler Herro. It just means they want to keep their options open as much as possible. What if Kevin Durant in a week says he reports to camp and he doesn't go well and he's like, I want to be
he's running
traded. And
around
like
with a cell phone in his pocket, and
yeah, it's like, I mean, who knows, right? You just don't know. So that's the argument for the Heat to wait to the last possible minute. But you run the risk of, Tyler. I'm not saying Tyler's not going to sign the contract that he'd do that, right? It's money at the end of the day, guaranteed money. But Tyler's going to have to deal with that for the next month. The
yeah.
questions of why haven't you signed the extension? Where is it at? Have you talked to the Heat? How do you feel about not having that extension signed yet? Does it raise concerns about your future with the team? Like that's all going to be there for him if that
Mm-hmm.
extension is still looming. So it's an interesting issue, but at the end of the day, it's a business, right? And the Heat have to do what's best for them. And at the end of the day, Tyler also is going to get his money one way or the other. So,
Right.
um, I we'll see what happens. But again, I wouldn't at this point. We're reaching the point where I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat and if the extension news comes out because we're getting late in the off season and there's less than a month away until the deadline.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's going to be another trade between now
Yeah,
and
it's hard to see. It's
but
NBA, right? You never rule it out, but it's just
yeah,
that usually that doesn't work like that at this time. It's
yeah,
not the way these trades don't happen at this time of the year.
yeah. And the other thing with Tyler is I think no matter what, he's kind of going to be the guy who's got, if it's not trade rumors hovering above him, it's like you said, why doesn't he sign the extension? Or
Yeah.
how good is he going to be, right? Because I think remains him and Bam still, just because of their age, remain the biggest X factors. And I think Tyler, even more so than Bam, because we know Bam is an all-star caliber player, an all defensive kind of guy. Obviously, Tyler's coming off the 6-man of the year campaign, but injuries limited him in the playoffs. And we haven't seen, obviously he was such a star performer in the bubble playoffs, but since then we have not seen it necessarily translate in the postseason. I think no matter what, he's going to be the guy who's in the middle of, he's the big topic no matter what, whether it is trade rumors, whether it is, like you said, in camp, it'll be the extension, or when the season goes on, it's, maybe he'll be incredible this year and kind of silence any of those questions about can he be the third star for this team. But if he's still, he's still developing. So I think in the regular season, that's still going to be kind of the big topic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I was about to make that point. Like I think you're right. Even if that extension is signed the next few weeks, it's still gonna be like the prove it year for Tyler Herro. That's how
Right,
it's going to be
exactly.
framed, right? Like he can't be traded this year, but next year he could be traded.
Right.
So can he prove that that he made the right decision and they should keep him? Unfortunately for Tyler, like that's just the way it is for him. I don't know, it's just the position he's
It's
in
a
at this
Chris Bosh
point.
thing a little bit, right? I mean, obviously Bosh is a better player than Bosh was a better player than Tyler is now, but it's the
Yeah,
same thing. It's the third guy. Kevin
right.
Love, with LeBron, the third guy always kind of gets
Yeah,
the biggest scrutiny, I would say.
yeah, and kind of transition to our next question entering camp. I think this goes well with what we're talking about. He probably, I'm thinking, is probably going to be starting this year, right? He's
Yeah.
been pretty open about his desire to be promoted to a starting role after winning Sixth Man of the Year last season. Um, Again, if he's starting, that puts even more pressure on him, right? More
Yeah.
is going to be expected of him. How will he fit playing, significant minutes next to Bam and Jimmy, right? The Heat last year, like they staggered those three guys a lot,
Yeah.
at least early in the game, and it worked well. Like, will he fit along those two guys? Can he play off the ball? With Kyle Lowry as a point guard and Jimmy having the ball in his hands a lot and Bam having the ball in his hands a lot. Like Tyler ran the show when he entered the game,
Mm-hmm.
usually off the bench. So again, as Pat Riley said, he'll have to, Tyler will have to earn that starting spot. But you would think, he probably will start this season. And that'll be interesting to see how that all works out because I would say, like, this is just my opinion. I think Max Strus probably fits better, or Duncan. A player like that, Max or Duncan, fit better with that group. Not saying that Tyler is not one of the five best players in the roster, because he is.
Mm-hmm.
It's that shooter that could, catch and shoot, elite catch and shoot player like Duncan and Max that fits so well next to Bam and Jimmy and Kyle. And Tyler is, he can be that, but that's not really his game.
Yeah.
So I am really interested to see how that all plays out.
Yeah. That'll be I would guess no matter what they're gonna stagger those guys still a lot, right? So like starting people make a bigger deal of the starting lineup than certainly than NBA coaches.
Yeah,
Players
definitely.
do, obviously
Starting is
fans.
overrated, right?
But yeah, I mean you're right. I think it could go one and two. Well, one way it could go is just it doesn't work that well, and they switch eventually, right? If it's not going well. Another way it could go is maybe it's a big area for Tyler to potentially improve is that 3-point shot, and we have he takes a lot of high degree of difficulty threes. Maybe it unlocks something if he kind of embraces playing that shooter position at the start of games, and then you take Jimmy out 8 minutes in or something, and
Mm-hmm.
Tyler gets to run the show for the last couple of minutes of the the first quarter, and the start of the second, or something like that. It can unlock another dimension for him, which I think would be very useful for this team. And then just kind of in the end, you want to have your five best guys. You want your five best guys to be able to play together, and you start them all year long, let them figure things out. It ultimately kind of probably helps you in the playoffs, as long as it doesn't hurt you too much during the regular season to affect your seeding.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And yeah, I think they still will get staggered a good amount,
Yeah,
but there's no way around it. They're going to be playing more minutes than they did last year together, just because
yeah, sure.
he's starting with them, right?
Yeah, they're
Um,
gonna play 6 minutes together at the start of
yeah,
every game.
six every game basically. And then the other question starting lineup is obviously starting power forward, right? Who's it going to be?
Mm-hmm.
I think you and I both agree it's probably going to be Caleb Martin, right? At least
Yeah,
to start the year.
slash Caleb
So
slash Jimmy, like they're kind of both 3-4s,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I could see like Jimmy closing games at the four, and then Caleb starting games. But this team is very similar as to last year. I mean, the only two
That's a big
faces
change.
are Darius Days and Jovic, but they lost their starter in PJ Tucker, right? So they're gonna have to fill that somehow. And if Tyler Herro does get promoted to a starting role, that starting lineup is gonna look, a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think we should probably, when we talk about projecting the starting lineup in the preseason, like don't forget that like Markieff Morris was like a he started at points last year, right early in the year, was at
Yeah,
least like a big like guys. The lineups change massively as the year
sure.
goes on.
Yeah.
Like we're the other guy we had to talk about here is probably Haywood Highsmith, and like if that works, right? Like no one at the start of last year would have guessed that Max Strus was going to be a starter, right? Like it was
Right. Or like Caleb
Duncan's.
Martin was gonna be a rotation player.
Yeah.
right?
So
Yeah.
like if it, because Caleb is probably more of a 3 than a 4. Same with Jimmy, obviously. If that just doesn't work that well, and all of a sudden they stick Haywood Highsmith in and it works because he's a little bit more of a traditional 4, a little bit bigger body, a guy who's you know probably a better rebounder than Caleb Martin, then yeah, we might see that. Even though again, like I said, you want your 5 best players. Ideally, you want your 5 best players to be able to all play together and have that be the lineup on the floor at certain times, but it never works like that. And it definitely, that is not Eric Spoelstra's approach traditionally.
No,
There's much more about how the 5 pieces fit together than just stick 5 guys out there
individuals.
and make it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. And to go back real quick to Tyler Hero starting, one of the reasons I think it will happen is because they have a perfect guy to replace him as a 6 man in Victor Oladipo, right? Like it just seems
True.
like
Yeah,
Oladipo's
that's true.
prime for a really good season, season. He's healthy offseason for the first time in 3 or 4 years. All by all people who like have been close to Victor this offseason, they all say he looks great and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to fit well in that 6 man role off the bench, kind of running the team. So it kind of gives the Heat the luxury of saying, okay, yeah, Tyler Herro was the 6 man of the year last year, but we have another former All-Star
Yeah.
who could be in the running for that award this season. So, I would expect Victor to kind of take on that 6 man role if Tyler Herro is moved to the starting lineup.
It kind of makes it easier to manage that too, right?
Yeah,
Whereas Victor and Tyler, trying to find them both minutes off the bench when they
right.
are pretty similar, now obviously very different players, but would play a similar role in that they're kind of a ball handler with the bench unit,
Mm-hmm.
a, a guard, a true guard. Maybe Victor Oladipo can play some 3 a little bit. Although I guess Tyler, again, positionless basketball or whatever, but those guys are similar where they're going to have the ball in their hands. Um, Hard to find Jimmy his 36 minutes and staggering it with Tyler, and then finding Oladipo his. Obviously Vic can play a supporting role. I think a little bit easier just because of the defensive ability. But those are 3 guys who they're obviously, and then not to mention Kyle Lowry. Like those are 4 guys who you want to, when they're on the court, basically to kind of have the ball in their hands to maximize what they can do.
Yeah, for sure. But as it does make it easier with Victor and Tyler to kind of manage those two. But I will say, like now, if Strus is moved to the bench, right? And again, we're all talking about hypotheticals here.
We haven't even seen one
We
practice.
we haven't even talked to Eric Spoelstra in like 3 months. But then you have Max Strus and Duncan off the bench, right? So that's going to be tough to manage. I can't imagine that both of those guys will be used off the bench consistently, right? You would think it'd be one or the other. It's easier to manage when one is starting and one is coming off the bench, and they kind of play off
because they
each
just
other.
replace each other. Yeah.
Yeah, but now I think it makes it a little trickier. So, there are some again. This is very similar roster last year, but there are some changes that Eric Spoelstra and his staff are going to have to work through to see what fits best. And I'm sure there'll still be some experimenting early in the year and in the preseason because there are going to be some different combinations.
Okay, let's move over to the bench. Looking at a couple of interesting position battles. We kind of already talked about Haywood Highsmith, so I think we can.
Yeah.
I think both of us think he's going to be a contributor in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, let's do this first, but I want to go through the
Okay.
numbers game because I was going through
You just think there's going to be a crunch?
Yeah, there might be a crunch in the back end, but yeah, let's do this first and then we can get into that.
Okay, well, the first one is just the backup center spot, Dedmon versus Yurt. It's just kind of one of those guys is going to play. One of them is probably not.
That's the big one, right? That's like the big position battle I think entering camp because it feels like most of the roles are kind of settled, other than like Duncan and Strus, right? If they're both on the bench, but backup center is Dwayne Dedmon has pretty much been the backup center since he signed with the Heat a year and a half ago. Well, Omer Yurtseven seems to be primed for that backup center role, right, this year, especially
it was a
how
little
he looked
surprising,
last
I think, when
season.
Dedmon came back, right? We all thought it was just going to be turn it over to Yurt. It's his turn.
Yeah, and I think not only we weren't the only ones surprised. Like I've talked to people close to the Heat that say they were surprised that Dwayne Dedmon was signed because it just seemed like that was a natural progression for him. But Yurt's gonna have to earn it. It's not gonna be easy. So that is a position battle where one of those guys is obviously gonna be the backup center, but I think it's up in the air at this point. Maybe do both get spots in the rotation because of the lack of power forward depth in the roster? Does Eric Spoelstra actually play big and like play Yurtseven with Bam, and Yurtseven plays, as a 4, and Dedmon still gets minutes as a backup 5. Maybe, but I think more realistically, it's gonna be one or the other.
Yeah.
At least as far as consistent minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bam play with one of them sometimes, but I don't think it's going to be enough to be like we need both of these guys to be in the rotation for more than, maybe one guy gets like 2 minutes a game or something and foul trouble situations or whatever. But yeah, that is. I mean, like I said, I was surprised that they brought Dedmon back. I think part of it is they like him as a culture guy, clearly. And like you said, it's always competition's good, right? And they could just based on like the money they had to spend, like it was basically they had to make smaller moves, and I think Dedmon, like it was kind of like a no risk. I won't say high reward because like what is the reward of having Dwayne Dedmon? Like he's a pretty average backup center.
But he's solid as a backup
center.
Yeah,
exactly.
You can rely on him.
You're not going to be going, coming to the trade deadline. They're not going to be looking for a backup center. Right. Because, barring an injury or a massive regression from Dedmon, one of those two guys is going to be solid enough for them. Highsmith, so what are your thoughts on that? Run me through that roster crunch that you're looking at.
Yeah, so I have down here as, and stop me if you think I'm wrong on a guy, but I think these are the guys who are definitely going to get playing time, at least entering the season. Victor Oladipo, Caleb Martin, Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, which I know, but I still think he's pretty.
Yeah, he'll play. He was a starter in the playoffs last year for the team went to the Eastern Conference.
I don't think he's just going to be complete out of the rotation, but Gabe Vincent, Bam Adebayo, and Jimmy Butler. That's 8 guys. If we are going to say that Heat are going to go with 9-man rotation, which I think is pretty fair, right? Consistently, they're going to have to pick between Yurtseven, Highsmith, Dedmon, Jovic, which I don't think Jovic is going to be ready early in the year to play consistently, but I put him on there. Days, who, again, I don't know if he'll be ready to play early on, but he is a power forward, and I just put him on the list because he is a power forward that has some like intriguing skill set. And Duncan Robinson. Obviously, you're going to need a backup center, so you would think either Yurtseven or Dedmon will be the 9th guy. And then maybe Highsmith 10th if they go 10 deep. Duncan 10th if they need a shooter. But as much as I really like Highsmith, I think he was impressive in Summer League, and he has a skill set that Heat really need after losing PJ. I just don't know if there's going to be room for him if this team is fully healthy with the way the roster is set up right now.
I feel like this team is going to go 10 deep, I will say. I think just because of – and obviously there's going to be a ton of games where Kyle Lowry's not in there.
Yeah, there'll be injuries. We know,
So it is sort of like a moot point, and then you get the chance to earn this throughout the whole season and see what the rotation is come postseason time. But, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of, that Duncan Strus dynamic will go a long way to, I think, determining which it's like weird to think that it's going to affect whether a guy like Haywood Highsmith can play, but it probably will because, there were a lot, obviously in the playoffs, they were not playing Duncan. Like you run out of room for minutes, and it's gonna, it's gonna have a big trickle down effect. I know Gabe Vincent is like, they love him. We talked about how many ball handlers they have though. Is there any chance we could see his minutes dwindle? I mean, he was so good for them at various points throughout the postseason, especially. But it's another spot where it feels like, like I mentioned those 4 ball handlers earlier, and obviously those guys are going to play together. So you would like a more traditional backup point guard, but could we see fewer minutes for him?
Yeah, I guess it's possible, especially if you're starting Herro and Lowry together and Victor's the 6th man, right? I mean, how many minutes they're realistically going to be for Gabe when all 3 of those guys are healthy and available? That's a fair point. I just put him on that list because I know that Heat like him a lot. Yeah, I know that he was really good for them late in the season, and especially in the playoffs when Kyle was hurt. So I think he'll at least start off getting consistent minutes. I don't think it's going to be 20-plus minutes a game. It'll probably be like between 10 and 15, right? It's because you have so many guys ahead of him on the depth chart. But I put him on the list for now because I think he'll start the year in the rotation. But yeah, that could be a guy that as the year goes on, if the Heat need to make room for a guy like Highsmith, Maybe he is the guy who loses minutes.
Yeah, I think people forget how little Oladipo played in the regular season last year because he was
Yeah.
such a big part of the playoffs. If that will change a lot of the Heat's outlook in the regular season. We can breeze through these last couple ones.
And real quick, the Heat really didn't have to, like you said, the Heat didn't really have to confront this issue last year because
right.
said Victor didn't play most of the year, and then in the playoffs when Victor did play and Kyle Lowry, or either Kyle Lowry was hurt or then when Kyle Lowry came back, Tyler Herro was hurt.
Tyler Herro was
so
hurt,
it was
right.
like they never really had to deal with that.
And in
how
the
do we
regular
play
season,
these
they
four
were
guards?
always missing guys. Whether it was obviously
Yes.
Kyle Lowry for a lot of the year, Jimmy in and out, COVID stuff
Right.
in December, Bam missing a ton of time early in the year. So, and it's that's why it's kind of foolish a little bit to go so deep.
Yeah.
I think on lineup stuff in the preseason because injuries are going to happen, especially with an older team. If it's not injuries, it's going to be rest. But at the start of the year, and coaches always want to think of the best case scenario because ideally everyone's healthy come playoff time, and you got to make these tough decisions. So hopefully we'll get a little glimpse of what, because the Heat will be full strength as far as we know at the start of camp. So we'll get a little bit of a look at what Eric Spoelstra's thought process is starting next week. Skimming through the last couple of ones, you touched on Jovic. I'd be shocked if he plays meaningful minutes this year at this point.
Yeah, especially early in the
Unless he
year.
takes
I
a
mean,
massive that we didn't
right.
expect.
It'd be surprising. I mean, like you said, there might be injury issues that he has to play a few minutes here and there. That I would not be surprised by that, right? But as far as like playing a significant role in this team and as a rookie, I just don't see it.
Do you think there's any chance he spends time in Sioux Falls, or they just want to keep him around the team?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, why not? They did it with J-Rich. I know J-Rich was a second round pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Bam was a rookie. Eric Spoelstra said that was a possibility. Bam never went because Bam ended up being really good and essential to them at that point as a backup center to Hassan. But Eric Spoelstra didn't rule it out that year for Bam, who was a lottery pick.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why it wouldn't be any different for Jovic, especially if he doesn't play. He needs minutes. He needs experience. He's young. I would not be shocked if he plays a little bit in Sioux Falls.
Darius Days, you mentioned him as a guy who's on the back fringe of the roster, basically. We didn't mention UD as the guy who could earn playing time. I think the ship has sailed on that one as him in the rotation. But Darius Days, just kind of thoughts on what he might give this team.
Yeah, I mean, he's a two-way contract guy, right? So he's limited to 50 games, but I just put him on that list because, again, he's a
if
true
the Heat
power
signs
forward.
a two-way guy, if the Heat signs a two-way guy, I assume he's got something.
Exactly. They expect him to be playing. They expect him to at least be good enough to play rotation minutes. But he's a true power forward. He can shoot threes. He's a pretty versatile defender. So he has that skill set, just like Highsmith, that they need at that spot that they like at that spot. But he's a rookie, right? So again, I'd be surprised if he plays early on, but as the season develops, maybe, so just a guy to watch. He just fits the mold of what he like at the power forward spot.
We touched on Duncan versus Strus already, but I think that is the one where there's the best chance that both guys play potentially because you can never have too many shooters, especially if Strus, obviously if Duncan gets back to what he was 2-3 years ago, like it's impossible to not play him. And if Strus plays the way he plays last year, it's kind of impossible not to play him too. So that's a position battle, potentially a starter who starts, but I wouldn't be shocked if both are in the rotation at various points in this season. And obviously, if it goes well enough for Duncan, he becomes a trade name to know also. More so
he's already
than he already is. Yeah, more so than he already is. But right now, I think people are like, a terrible contract, you got to throw him in.
Yeah.
But if he comes back to life as a shooter, it changes things a little bit.
I think people forget that Duncan shot 40+% after December last year, right? He started off really slow. He was pretty good through the end of the year. I know he lost his spot because of defense, and Max Strus is really good, but Duncan is still a very good shooter. I don't think people should forget about him just yet.
34, like he's gonna play. Like in the playoffs, he's gonna play. Like there becomes a point where if you shoot that well, that the math just says you gotta play him.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Heat's got one more spot left for the preseason roster. I don't want to make you name a name of a guy they're going to get, but what do you think they're looking at? Who, like what position?
Yeah. I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like they just they're gonna fill that spot. Like, why wouldn't you, right? You have an open spot. You bring in a developmental guy that they like, and sign him probably to an Exhibit 10, and you could get him into the G League that way on their G League affiliate and continue developing him. So I don't know what it's gonna be. I don't even think they're looking for a specific position, but just a developmental guy they like and they've had their eye on.
So you think kind of best prospect available?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, best prospect available that's willing to come in for camp, kind of understanding he's not really fighting for a roster spot. It's just to get you into the program, to our G League team, and then see what happens.
Yeah, they can sell on that because they've done that obviously before with Gabe Vincent or lots of guys. But Gabe Vincent probably the most notable one when they or Kendrick Nunn, I guess probably the most notable one when they snatched him up at the end of one season, got him in the fold, and it obviously he's making now. So, all right, any final thoughts before training camp gets started next week?
No, I think we covered pretty much all of it. But basketball is here. I know everyone's really excited about the Dolphins right now, which rightfully so. But the Heat, it's about to be a busy time here in South Florida where we have Dolphins on Sundays, Hurricanes on Saturdays, Heat throughout the week, Panthers throughout the week. So we're getting to that fun time of the sports calendar.
Marlins mercifully almost finished. So
I forgot about that. That's right.
Sandy Alcantara starts. So once every 5 days, Sandy starts. There you go.
Yeah, Sandy's
lots of good sports stuff going on in South Florida. We kind of got to we went through this whole podcast talking about even that was interesting, right? We're see what kind of shape he's going to come in. That's probably the one thing we didn't hit on. Big topic of conversation at the offseason is what is he going to look like after a year in the Heat conditioning program, basically. And that's the other I talked about Tyler is if he's the major X factor, that's the other one. If Kyle Lowry can turn back the clock a couple of years, then there's your third star. So it'll be fun to see what this looks like next week once we get started. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chang. He'll have all your coverage from Media Day and pictures from the beach and the Bahamas. You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. I'm at Hard Rock Stadium most of the time.
You're not at the Bahamas.
Because we've got football going on. Not in the Bahamas, unfortunately. In Miami though, which isn't bad. So it's not like you're like a like Minnesota beat writer. He's probably like if he was going to the Bahamas, he'd be like,
I wouldn't come back probably if I was a Minnesota beat writer.
Yeah, one last trip before this snow gets started. Like you're coming back and all Miami is gonna be probably thunderstorms the whole time after you get back, but for the most part, you're back in Miami, and it'll be
I'll be okay.
All right.
Yeah, I'll be okay. I'll survive.
So thanks as always for listening, and I'm just hanging up because it's not stopping recording. See ya.